Well, greetings everyone, and welcome to another installment of Western Carolina University's Global Black Studies program webinar series. And this is our April installment titled The Black Athlete in the 21st Century. And we will have our finality, our spring finale webinar will be April 25th. And that will be on Black women's rhetoric. Now, first, I want to thank everyone for joining us. I want to also thank Western Carolina University. I want to thank the Chancellor's Office, the Provost's Office, and the College of Arts and Sciences Dean's Office for all the support that they've been given to the Global Black Studies program. I want to thank and acknowledge the indigenous people of this region, the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Nation, for allowing us to be guests here in Cullowhee and at Western Carolina. I think it's very, very important that we always acknowledge and show gratitude for indigenous people as we occupy their space. I am so excited for this webinar series today, particularly because I certainly love sports. And I'm one of the weirdos who not only love sports because of what happens on the court or on the field or on the mat, but also the politics that surrounds sports, as well as history, the history of the sport, historical markers, landmarks, things that change over time in history related to sports. I love all of that, and that's probably why I love the old school rivalries so much, because they usually involve all of those things. And today we're going to discuss the Black athlete in the 21st century, and it's going to be an informal conversation, but from informed perspectives. So, you know, we have themes that will drive our conversation, but not necessarily a list of questions for our panelists. Now, I want to introduce our panelists. I'll do it from the youngest to the oldest. So we have Mr. Kory E. Woods. He is a professional journalist. He has a degree from Eastern Michigan University, my undergraduate alma mater, and he also has a degree from Specs Howard. He started out as a photojournalist, and he did much work with Michigan's solely existing Black newspaper, which is very important to me as a historian, the Michigan Chronicle. And he then expanded out to actual print journalism or writing words along with his photojournalism. And he is now with the Woodward Sports Network. And I'm excited for that because it's a new thing, a new company, a new entity in Detroit. And it kind of represents, for those of us who are from Michigan, from the Detroit area, or follow the story, you know, you can say it's part of the rebranding and new directions of the city of Detroit. Yeah. And it's very, very important that we acknowledge that as well. And it's going to come out more in our discussion, right? And then we have Mr. Alex Gary. He is the Director of Athletics here at Western Carolina University. He is a former student athlete here at Western Carolina University. And he has experience as an administrator, as an athlete on multiple levels and multiple locations. So he has great insight. And the obvious will be stated. He is a former Black athlete, right? But you know, sometimes you got to state the obvious, right? And being an African-American man in an administrative position in a Division I collegiate program, him being an African-American man also gives us further insight from the other side of he is probably more sensitive and empathetic to the unique challenges that Black athletes face. So I'm very, very excited today. I just have a brief intro, and then we're going to kind of get into it, fellas, if you don't mind. Now, I initially wanted to have this webinar tomorrow, but I really needed Alex to be on this webinar, and we have a football game tomorrow.
Oh, okay.
Things flipped on its head during the COVID.
We used to have a football game tomorrow. It got canceled.
Oh, it got canceled.
It got canceled on Monday.
Oh man. Well, things happen, but that's why we planned it today, because initially he wouldn't have been available. But I wanted it tomorrow because tomorrow is Paul Robeson's birthday.
Okay.
Right. And Paul Robeson, for those who don't know, Paul Robeson was a collegiate athlete, a professional athlete, an attorney, a thespian on stage and on film, an accomplished singer, a civil rights leader, a human rights leader, an anti-colonization in Africa leader, and he was also the first Black person to play Othello in the UK and on Broadway. He was a victim of McCarthyism because he had strong left-leaning ideologies and inclinations, and because his close association with his friend and fraternity brother, Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois, and his mentor, the radical Black attorney, William Patterson, who was the first attorney for the Scottsboro Boys case in the 1930s, I want to say. I hope I would be embarrassed as a historian to get that date wrong, but nonetheless, right? And Paul Robeson would represent, before Malcolm X became our bright, shining prince in the Black community, Paul Robeson was our strong, powerful king, right? And his memory has been slightly tainted and erased because of his victimhood to McCarthyism, which brought his acting career as well as his singing career to a grinding halt. Paul grew up in Princeton, New Jersey, where his father was a AME Zion minister, which is very important to the Black community here in Cullowhee, which is very important to the history of the Black contribution to Western Carolina University, the AME Zion Church. So it isn't a loose connection. And he also was a janitor at Princeton, the elite Ivy League university. Paul earned an academic scholarship to Rutgers in 1915, the year Booker T. Washington died, and joined the football team, where he was All-American 2 years, 1917, 1918, although they erased that because of McCarthyism, and I'm not sure if the NCAA has put it back on the books as of yet, kind of similar to some of the victimhood that Jim Thorpe experienced. Nonetheless, Paul also was a varsity letterman in several other sports, as many Black athletes at PWIs during that time were. So like Jim Brown, he too played lacrosse, for an example. Paul then went on to Columbia University to earn a law degree, which he financed as a member of 2 NFL teams in the National Football League. So he was in law school while in the NFL, and he paid for his law school fees with his measly NFL check, because people had 9-to-5 jobs in those days. We're talking the 1920s when he was in the NFL. And then from there, he began his professional career as an activist, as an artist, and as a public speaker. So it was a time, and this is where I want to start our conversation. It was a time where that type of character and that type of Renaissance man was really the image and the identity of the Black athlete. And we saw that through the years with people like Bill Russell. I'm gonna shout him out because he's my frat brother. first Black NBA coach, first player coach in the NBA history, in 11 NBA titles, right? And he got a bunch of defensive player of the years as well. But we think of people like Bill Russell, Jim Brown, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Muhammad Ali, right? And others. And now in today, going in the 21st century, Black athletes are confronted with instructions to shut up and dribble, to keep politics out of athletics. In the case of Colin Kaepernick, another one of me and Kory's frat brothers, shameful plugs. Shameful plugs. But in all fairness, I shouted out the Alpha, so it should be all good. But nonetheless, but at the same time, we're seeing growing activism amongst Black athletes. We see that with the ladies in the WNBA, for example. We are seeing an extreme amount of very, very sophisticated entrepreneurship, right? And I could just list all the names in regard to that, but I'm not going to do that. But I did. That's how I want to kind of contextualize, the types of things in conversation we'll have. So I want to first give a disclaimer and say race is central to our discussion because this is a global Black studies webinar, and race is one of the key things we interrogate in the discipline, right? So I'm going to start this out with a very bland, generic question, and I'll allow you gentlemen to chime in at your pleasure. And it is, how have things changed for the Black athlete in the 21st century? And when I say Black athlete, I'm talking both boys and girls, men and women, and also LGBTQI athletes, right? And also in that consideration, I want us to also think about entrepreneurship and activism, right? So I'll pose that to you all. How have things changed for the Black athlete in the 21st century?
Oh man, I mean, that's like you said, it's not a very it's not a real black and white question, so to say, even if we're talking about race. So it's not a real black and white question, but I think one thing that has changed is you talked about it from right there. Start off, Laura Ingraham, when she went to shut up and dribble, that is what they were encouraged to do. The Michael Jordans, Republicans wear sneakers too. They were encouraged to just be about their on the court activities. They were not encouraged to be in politics. They were not encouraged to have platforms and shirts like LeBron with the more than an athlete, owning their own media. That's really a big thing right there. How the black athlete in the 21st century is different. They're owning their own media. When I was at the NBA All-Star game last year in Chicago, I had the opportunity when I was going around and getting photos and everything. I was able to run into Steven Jackson. Steven Jackson and Matt Barnes, they have their All the Smoke podcast that got picked up by Showtime. And I just straight up asked him, like, do you think that there is a mistrust between athletes and the media these days? That's why you guys got your own platform. They're like, no, it's just a new day and age. And, it's more media. We get to tell our story. We get to be the ones to break the story. We get to tell our narrative, and you get to hear it from the horse's mouth. And I think out of anything that we can, discuss about the change of the Black athlete, it has to start with the fact that they are starting to create and own their own media and tell their own narrative. Because, me, Dave, me personally, that for a while I was doing my photojournalism. I did not getting the media studies and journalism degree was not a focus of mine. But as I started to see that there were people not like us telling our narrative, and I mean, it's always been that way, but being able to really see it more and more and how flagrantly wrong they were getting it, it's like, okay, I got to go back and go get this degree. Not that I needed to go do journalism, but I needed to get myself in this game because we need to start telling our own stories. And that's just to bring it home. That's what I think is the major difference of the black athlete. They're controlling their own narrative right now.
All right. I want to follow up briefly with you before we go to Mr. Gary. You mentioned something about the emphasis coming down from various different powers for athletes to remain silent on political issues. Do you think that's kind of ironic when we consider so many American politicians are former athletes, right? You know, I mean, our current president played football at Delaware, right?
Mm-hmm.
He said Delaware State, that's HBCU. He had a senior moment, to be fair. I have senior moments all the time now. I be in class stuttering like I know what I'm trying to say. Why can't I say it? Let me calm down.
I have those too.
Indeed, right? We think about the only president from the state of Michigan, Jerry Ford. He was the offensive lineman for the University of Michigan football team, right? You know, you have W. Bush was a college athlete, right? At Yale, and you know, as a part of the cheerleading team. My mom used to coach cheerleading for years. It's a very competitive athletic sport. People need to be reminded of that sometimes, I feel. And then we had people like Governor Jack Kemp, who ran for president, right? We had people like Lynn Swan, you know, J.C. Watts, you know, go on and on. I mean,
that's many.
yeah, do we, you know, is it ironic, or how do you feel about that notion, but then knowing reality of how many former athletes actually are prominent in politics?
So let me just make sure I'm getting this right. You're talking about the irony of politicians not liking athletes to speak out on these issues, but some of them have been former athletes themselves.
Yes, sir.
I mean, shoot. I think it's deeper than that. Think about the fact that this country is built off the back of blacks, and they don't like us saying a damn word. Hate to use language, but it's just what it is. And so you know what? I don't think that's going to change, unfortunately. It could change over time as I think the world is changing, that could possibly change. But as long as the powers in my opinion, are in place, they're going to want athletes just to, hey, shut up and dribble. Stay in their lane. They do not want these black athletes to be outspoken, because what's going to happen is black people in general drive this country from sports to consumership. Once they start having a bigger platform and start telling their story, things are going to get a little bit crazy. I think what the thing is now is, with this new media available, now you don't have to just go strictly through a journalist. You can just go straight to your phone and tell that story. They fear a guy like LeBron James, who's the most powerful athlete on the world. And they fear him speaking out because he's messing up the establishment, the status quo. So, I mean, hopefully I made some sense right there, but just it's not going to change. It's definitely ironic though that they can make money off of the backs of black athletes. This country can make money off the backs of black athletes, but when it comes to hearing how they feel about these laws that these politicians are making for them, no. Go do what you're known for. We don't care about your opinion right here.
Indeed. Awesome. And then to Mr. Gary, just to restate the question so the audience knows what he's responding to, is how have things changed for the black athlete in the 21st century?
I think the black athlete in the 21st century just isn't afraid to speak their mind anymore. I think that there are multiple sources of support now, and whether it's, you know, real or fake at times, but you know, I think that just the understanding that you can speak your mind and you know, you're not gonna get some of the actions that were done to us a long time ago by speaking your mind. And so I think that just the ability to feel comfortable, the ability to feel supported, the ability to act as a community together too, and know that, you know, we're all kind of stronger together. It's funny, I know we'll probably talk about this a little bit later, but I'm part of a group called the Black AD Alliance. And it's all these Black ADs from around the country. We meet once every other week. and just have conversation. And we're all there to help each other. The mission is to have more Black athletic directors in the country. And so I think that now that certain professions and Black ADs are in certain positions of power, specifically at large institutions like Ohio State, Michigan, Auburn, we've been able to, and this is getting to the point of what's changed, we've been able to leverage those positions of power to really be able to reach back out and help other people. I was helped. Individuals have allowed me to be able to get to where I am here in this position of Western Carolina. And so I think that as time has moved on, there have been people that have gotten in positions of power, like whether it's a LeBron James or Magic Johnson doing his thing in business or others. Just the tutelage that occurs, the community and the buy-in to help, again, reach back out is tremendous. And I think that's one of the things that's provided an advantage to the Black athlete in today's society.
Indeed, indeed. And I have a follow-up, but before I do that, I want to state, it's important to note, Alex came back in May. I got here in August, right? Before we arrived, Black students led by Black student athletes had engaged in serious degrees of organizing and activism on campus, which led to the creation or the need to hire someone to create Black studies here at Western Carolina. And I was hired to do that. So me being here is a direct result of that. And we unfortunately just at every university across the nation has these issues one time or another, but we had a racial hate speech type of incident on campus, which was dealt with appropriately and efficiently. But student athletes, Black student athletes in particular, were too in the forefront of raising awareness and the spotlight on the issue to make sure the issue is addressed. And I think that by having a director of athletics like you, Alex, it made that reality, that phenomenon, managed in a way where it was beneficial to the university and beneficial to the students, as opposed to that led to an unnecessary catastrophe where, you know, an athletic director might say, shut up and dribble, right? Which would turn into a big thing. But I do want to follow up about, now, how important is that mentorship in regards to developing people like yourself, as well as furthering the gains and solidifying some of the changes and gains that's been made in the last 20 years?
Well, first I want to say I've been so proud of our student athletes here, in particular our football players. And I think that that's why it's so important when you have a platform like, we could continue to use this person's name, but LeBron James and others, Chris Paul, and that you take advantage of that because people are watching. And when you talk about that mentorship, that's exactly what it is. It's really mentorship from a distance. And campuses across this country and student athletes across this country on different campuses have mobilized themselves and done some things to use their own platforms, and they've been taught. And so I've been so happy and pleased with our student athletes here. They really are looking at strong leaders. And I look at myself in this position as a personal responsibility, because I believe that I know that there are a lot of student athletes here at Western Carolina that look at me in this position, wearing a button-down shirt every day and dress shoes. And, you know, hopefully I can prove to be a good example for them, that there are options out there outside of sports, that there are options out there outside of, you know, just other careers, that, you know, you can be in leadership. You can, and I love talking to the students. I feel like it's a personal responsibility. I think that there's so many things that go on crazy on a day-to-day basis in any job, but certainly with some of the stuff we've got going on now, to be able to just take some time and mentor students and listen to them, hear what they've got going on. I think it's so important, and I'm blessed to be in that position here.
Indeed, indeed. All right, fellas, someone posed a question in the Q&A, and they asked me to ask you all to briefly discuss the seemingly rise in the new millennium of Black women athletes, and they're increasing in prestige and voice and respect and et cetera, from tennis, golf, basketball, the mixed martial arts, track and field, which I remember as a kid in the 80s, Black women was dominating track and field when I watched the Olympics. But anyhow, you know, if you all would.
Yeah, it's sorry, Kory, it's so beautiful to see. It really is. It makes you smile every time. And I know that, you know, watching, I can't remember her name, the tennis player, not Serena, but Osaki, I can't remember exactly her name. That you know, had the different masks on, and, you know, just how much visibility that received, and the courage to use that platform to make change happen, right? And it's so beautiful to see. What also is beautiful to see is the support that those Black women get from Black men, and that is it's so, and it just it makes you proud, right? And it goes back to something I said earlier about, you know, not being afraid to speak your mind anymore, being afraid to use your platform. It's okay, and other people will support you. And so it's been phenomenal to see what they've done in the WNBA, especially the Atlanta team, and the change that they've been able to create as strong women. It's certainly a sight to see.
Awesome.
Oh man, it's definitely a beautiful thing to witness, especially the WNBA. I mean, just look at what Renee Montgomery did. I was just talking David about before we started. Renee Montgomery last season, she was talking about, I don't know if I'm going to play this upcoming season, you know, due to COVID. And what she do? When that former Atlanta Dream owner went on that, you know, little situation with the race and whatnot, and the whole league went against her, they forced her out. And what happened? Renee Montgomery ended up now becoming part owner of the Atlanta Dream. So she went ahead and took that role. Like, you know what? I'm going to step up and take this. But let's go look at Maya Moore. Maya Moore is somebody who a lot of people do not talk about. Basically gave up her career now with her husband, her new husband. They're fighting prison. They're doing prison reform. They're working on tackling that. I think we definitely have to give a big kudos to the ladies in sports, because I think they're using their platform in a way that the men have to actually catch up to them. Just look at during COVID when they did the bubble. Look at how outspoken they were over the whole George Floyd incident. They were the ones who were at the forefront of that. They were. So it's really amazing to see the Black women in this new day and age use her platform and their connections to, you know, better the community.
And I think that on the endorsement side, you know, they've proven to be very marketable and profitable as well, overcoming some of the longstanding stereotypes against Black women, like the angry Black woman. And, you know, how Serena Williams, for example, although they've tried it with her, they still keep trying it with her.
They still try it.
Yeah, but she, you know, still been able to establish herself as someone that is marketable and can market products and brands and things of that nature. But we still have a challenge with the disparity of the pay of women professional athletes in comparable sports to men. And we're still having some growing pains and challenges, which was exacerbated because of COVID, of you know, Title IX and women's athletics at colleges and universities. Either one of those that y'all might want to pick up on. So I'm kind of just throwing both things out there and see if anybody wanted to give some insight into that.
Oh, go ahead.
Kory, I'll let you go ahead. Somebody's blowing up my phone, so I'm trying to keep it quiet over here.
All right, so that was such a Ooh, that was such a mixed question right there. What part would you like me to hear first on that one?
It could be the money side on professional sports like WNBA versus the NBA. Maybe that'll be good because Alex has better insight maybe in regards to the Title IX question.
Yeah, I definitely that Title IX is definitely out my league. But if we're talking about like the salary disparity,
Yeah.
is that what you're looking at? I definitely think that there needs to be some improvement in that area. I think that the fact that you have NBA players where being a professional athlete is their main job, and then you have some WNBA players who are working two jobs. That's a problem. I don't. I think when it comes to like advertisements, sales, how much money they're generating, I don't think you can say that, hey, a Candace Parker should get paid the same amount as LeBron James or a Chris Paul because they don't necessarily generate that revenue. But on the same token, a WNBA player should not be making the same amount of money or getting paid less than the people who cover them.
Yeah, that's always a tough conversation, right?
Yeah.
It's always a very tough conversation because, you know, I guess as you were mentioning, making your comments, I was thinking, you know, the NBA and the WNBA, I mean, it's NBA, right? So there's a lot of money on the men's side that does support the women's side, but even more can support the women's side. You know, the players are making $40 million a year, some of them. It's unbelievable with those max contracts. And so, you know, if I think the NBA players, and I'm not trying to spend anybody else's money, but with all of the bargaining and everything else, I mean, I think that there could be some efforts made to, you know, whether it's 1% of all those NBA TV dollars and contracts and everything swinging over to the WNBA could make a huge difference. And I'm just using that as an arbitrary number, but that is always a very tough conversation. Even with Title IX, as we kind of think about some of that on college campuses, you know, I 100% want to have as many opportunities for men, women, so on and so. Absolutely, it's football makes things difficult because there's no women's team that has the number of athletes that football has, except rowing, and we don't have a rowing team here. But it's very difficult, right? The football sells the tickets and you know gets the subscribers and the sponsors and so on and so forth. And that's the thing I actually like about the college level is because football, men's basketball, women's basketball can help out all the sports. And it kind of goes back to the potential professional model that I was talking about. There's many other conversations that can be had about amateurism and players getting paid and all that paid and that kind of stuff. But the model that they have in college that, you know, we have one university and it has a football team that generates 70% of the revenue for everything else, but everything else is able to benefit from that. I think it would be hard to do that on a professional sports level because they're all owned by different people and it's different leagues. It's not like you have one team with 7 different sports or something like that. But I think that the model could work. It's just a matter of somebody figuring it out. And since the WNBA and the NBA are the same organization, it's my understanding essentially. I think that there could be some improvements there by adjusting to a new model.
Indeed. I just remember my niece sent me a picture that she saw online, posted by a Big Ten collegiate basketball, a women's basketball player, because she's from Michigan. She goes to Eastern Michigan. So we love the Big Ten back home. It's not our fault. We was raised that way, right? And I believe it was the Big Ten tournament, or it might have been the NCAA tournament, but it was just a great disparity in just the basic accommodations that the ladies were afforded compared to the fellas. And those certain things can be fixed and need to be fixed because that's more so on the NCAA level, the governing body level. most, I mean, let's be honest, you know, the individual schools don't have much control over that. You know, the additional dollars I guess they could spend, which would still be unfair, you know, in that regard. Now, just to shift it a little bit, but still in this universe, I remember when I was in South Africa, and I've been many times. So this was between 2012 and 2017. I can't remember what year. And it was a big deal on the news about the treatment of a Black woman track runner, who the Western media in particular viewed as looking too masculine and whatever. And her name was Caster Semenya. And it comes to find out that, you know, things beyond my expertise, that, you know, a more accurate description of her might be intersex because of medical practitioner mistakes at her birth, right? And it leads me into this awkward conversation that most people try to avoid, but because it's impacting, I think, a lot of Black trans amateur athletes, particularly in track and field, on how are we going to deal with, you know, recent developments in our society where we have to have real serious conversations about, you know, transgender people, and, you know, and because we're talking about Black people in this case, although you can approach it generally if you decide, you know, but about that. And are you hopeful? Because obviously I'm not asking you guys to make a stance or issue a policy recommendation. That would be unethical and inappropriate for me to do that, particularly for Mr. Gary. I would be wrong to set him up. So I'll put it this way. Are you all hopeful that we will be able to figure it out and get it right?
I'll take a stab at this one because, like you said, don't want to throw Mr. Gary in a tight spot because this is actually something that we talked about on Woodward Sports a few weeks ago, and I'll just say it like this: I believe in equality, but I think that when you have in order for us to get to for us to have a positive outcome regarding, you know, the transgender athlete, we have to be able to have an open and honest discussion without people being in their feelings about it, because we are entering uncharted waters right now. This is something, the way the evolution of the transgender athlete is growing is something that we have not seen before. We haven't seen it. So in order to get to a positive place, we would have to be able to have honest conversations. And you know what? Some of those conversations, they could end up heated. They could rub some people the wrong way. But if people go into it and kind of check their feelings, and the people who create these conversations, like you, with you having this platform right here, if you're able to create a brave space, not a safe space, a brave space where people can go ahead and be open and honest about their feelings, then we can get to a place, because the way it's evolving and at a rapid pace, it's going to have to be a discussion about how do we, as a society, you know, work with this.
Indeed. So are you hopeful that we will be able to get to that space as a society and as sports fans?
I have mixed opinions on it. Just being upfront, I have mixed opinions on it. I mean, and you know, I don't have a problem standing behind one opinion I do have on. I think that the conversation around the transgender athlete, first, I think more than anything, it does a disservice to women who are born female. I really do. Just I kind of look at it from a strength disparity on the scene. Like, okay, we have some ladies who are born female, and we have, you know, transgender women competing in the same realm as them, and the women who were born female are at a serious physical disadvantage. That's a conversation that we have to have. I'm not gonna say, yeah, I'm not gonna say whether I lean one way or the other, but that is a conversation that has to be had because it is an unfair advantage. Like I said, I don't want to go too deep on it, but that's just one of those things that, hey, we're gonna have to be able to talk about this without people getting in their feelings about it.
And there's examples of that, and then there's other examples that tilt the scale on the other side.
Yeah.
Because I grew up.
It works in so many different ways.
Indeed, I grew up as a wrestler, as a grappler. So for the first 19 years of my life, I spent more time wrestling than I didn't. Right. And I tell you, then and since then, I've seen so many girls, because we're talking about youth sports, seen so many girls get into wrestling and beat the boys. In fact, just this past states season, a couple girls across the states won the state championships. And I remember when I first saw a girl wrestler when I was a youth athlete, and it was at a tournament, and she placed. I believe she came in third or fourth, and I know a whole lot of guys that I grew up wrestling with who never placed. So I understand we have examples like what happened in the MMA fight, and then an example of somebody who transitioned from men's track and field to women's track and field, and was a complete underachiever in the men's and became an elite athlete with the women's. But then we got examples of, of the opposite type deal or whatnot. But yeah, and we're not going to press you, Mr. Gary, because I don't think it's appropriate. But I will ask though, but are you hopeful that we can get to a space where we can get it right?
Absolutely. I think that if we can get to a space where everybody can go out and compete, right? Just go out and compete. And, there's certainly is a lot of debate over, which do I compete here? Do I compete there? But competition is competition. You mentioned something, and I laugh because I can identify with that. You mentioned seeing young women wrestling, beating young men. And I've seen that in other sports too. And so it can happen, and it often does. But at the end of the day, I hope we can get to a place where we can just compete, and keep score. And that's the fun thing about sports and athletics.
Yes, you got to keep score, man. What's gonna make you work hard? Right? I remember going see my son doing youth soccer, and they didn't keep score, and I was disappointed because I was like, if they lose, I need him to feel that, and the world is not over, son. You lost, and deal with defeats and victories, and
you
learn that way.
Indeed.
I'm just I just want to add one thing on this. I am hopeful that we do get to a place that there can be equality across the board for everybody, because sports is one of the greatest unifiers in this country, and everybody needs, regardless of whether you're male, female, transgender, whatever, everybody should have the opportunity to compete, regardless.
Indeed. I mean, let's be real. For those of us who are failed athletes, I tried to walk onto the wrestling team at Eastern Michigan, and then I realized that I was just maybe a slightly above average high school grappler, mediocre perhaps. And so I admit I am a failed athlete, but I kind of lost my thoughts because
while you're gathering your thoughts, and I apologize to the folks that are watching, but I'm pretty familiar with Eastern Michigan. There's all this Eastern Michigan love going on. I used to live on top of Side Tracks in Depot Town.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Side Tracks is one of my favorite spots, the best hamburgers in Ypsilanti.
I think my tab is still open there.
If I hear one more thing about Sidetrack's hamburgers this week, because I already heard it from Terry Foster about how I haven't had one. So I'm glad.
Oh, indeed. I swear by it. I swear by it.
Sorry about that, but yeah.
Oh no, that's fine. That's fine. Yeah, then I don't even know what I was about to go with anyway. So let's just move on. What are the implications for college athletes? Just based upon some of the things we discussed, and are they being prepared for the unique challenges of being a Black college athlete, like before they even get to the college or university?
Yeah. I think it depends on how you were raised, right? Before you get to college or university. My mom raised me a certain way. She taught me about perception, being provided with. She taught me, insight about understanding the environment around you and all that kind of stuff. And I was always aware, and so I always knew it was there, but I didn't necessarily worry about it. I felt like I knew how to deal with it. If you weren't taught that way, it might come of more of a surprise to you, and it makes it tougher to handle those situations. But I think me as an administrator, us as administrators, it's important for us to make sure our students feel supported if they weren't prepared before they got here. And many times we don't know that. We don't know that, so we just have to start the conversation with them many times before they start it with us.
Indeed, indeed. Now, covering it as a journalist, Kory, and seeing, unfortunately, when things go wrong, right? Related to the same notion, but I'll frame it to you differently. Knowing what you know as a journalist, what advice would you give to a Black high school athlete before they go to college or university?
All of this stuff is so ironic because I was talking to Joy Bell about something about this today. Former Detroit Lions running back, New Orleans Saints, just a former NFL running back. So
Wayne State.
Yeah, Wayne State. Yeah, Wayne State. I don't know if I'm in the position to give one of these athletes advice, but I would say from a journalist perspective, man, stay off social media for one thing. Don't get your antics on there. But I think really these athletes up and coming, they need more mentorship. They need some more of these well-established Black athletes from alumni of the school or these professional athletes to go back and speak to them about what they're getting themselves into. I mean, just recently we've seen over the past 48 hours such a violent uptick of domestic assault of young Black male athletes. With Travis Rudolph, Jeff Gladney, those two guys in the past 48 hours were either one charged for first-degree murder or another one charged for physical assault. So, and I think it's not necessarily that they need the help when they get to college. I believe I'm just going to sit up here and say I would like to believe most of them come from great homes, but where we're really seeing them get in trouble is when they transition from college to the league. So I think that's where the real conversation needs to be had about where we need to focus the advice on, hey, making sure that when these Black athletes come outside of college, that they either get into the real world or they get into the professional league with some sense. Because we see the headlines of what some of these antics that Black athletes do. And I don't want to be that guy as a journalist just writing slam pieces all the time. I don't want that to be my job, but at the same time, I got to report what's real. So I think in my opinion, I think the focus needs to be on there more as opposed more on the college, because for the most part, I don't really see them act too crazy in college outside of just being young.
Indeed. I mean, yeah, they're doing the same stuff that we are who weren't athletes, so yeah, I can agree.
I'm not getting them athletes for doing some of the same stuff that I did or doing in college, and I wasn't an athlete, but when they get to the league and they kind of elevating the stupidity, it's like, okay, bring it back down a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I guess one thing that I would say is that athletes on every campus are noticed. It's just I get emails all the time. I saw one of your golfers will say, whatever the case may be. You know, sometimes they wear their stuff, and you know, many times they're real tall or real broad or something like that. And you know, I would just simply say to realize that you're going to stand out like a sore thumb, and that people will come in with preconceived notions about you. It could be your intelligence, it could be your motivation, it could be a number of different things. And so the way that you approach that, you could either feed that perception, or you can you know, you can work to show that you're more than just whatever they may think that you are. And that's, you know, my mother said the same thing to me, right? It's all about perception, and just understand how you may be looked at. Just be aware of that. And you know, people, I like when, you know, people are going to be themselves, right? You don't want to be somebody you're not. But I think it's important to just understand how many people may see you, and make decisions based on what you want those outcomes to be with those relationships. Because if you go to class and you act a certain way, if you do whatever the case may be, you're feeding it, and you're making it harder for other people like you at times. So,
Indeed.
And you know what? I want to piggyback off of that, because you know, when you said something really key right there, Mr. Gary. You said something about perception. Hate to say this, I really do hate to say this, but in my field, journalists are waiting for these Black athletes to slip up. And sometimes I've heard of stories where some journalists or content creators for these sports media companies, their specific job is just to follow a certain player just for the moment they mess up and can break that story. It's really what it is. So that's one piece of advice I would give. Just watch out, because there are journalists, not saying me, but there are journalists who are out there waiting for you to mess up. And from the very moment you mess up, they will have that story out quicker than you can
before you even get home.
Before you even know it.
Indeed. And if I found out you was doing that, Kory, I'll call you and say some letter words.
I don't need to trip us up, but there's enough people out there doing that.
Indeed, unfortunately, but you know, but that's the high profile people deal with that regardless of the reason why they're high profile. And that's something that I have to consistently remind myself of, being in a small place like where I'm at and where I left to come here, that, you know, I'm higher profile than what I realized, and I have to be mindful, down to simple things of what am I purchasing at the local gas station. I mean, to be quite honest with you, you know, and those types of things. I want to say this because I think it's important, me speaking from a perspective as a professor, as an educator who has taught at Eastern Michigan University, at Michigan State University, at the University of North Carolina, Pembroke, and now here at Western Carolina. The community colleges don't count because they didn't have any athletic programs. And I'll tell you, as a demographic, the best performers in any course I've taught have been student athletes. I'm going to keep, and I'm not just saying that, right? I'm saying it because it's the truth. And I don't think people look at that enough, right? You know, and obviously everything ebbs and flows, just like with anything, right? You might have a good couple years with the group of kids you got, might have a bad couple years with, you know, right? It ebbs and flows, and I take that in consideration. But right, the preconceived notion is that they're only there because of their athletic prowess, as opposed to that they also have the academic aptitude, right? That's why, like a Paul Robeson, who went on academic scholarship, for example, and other people who just get admitted to the school and walk on to the program, right? And things of that nature. But even those who have athletic scholarships, right? That doesn't mean that they didn't have the qualifications to be admitted. outside of being a student athlete. And I tell you, as I said, as a demographic, student athletes have been my top performers. And I've taught people who now play in the NBA, was in the NFL, but they washed out, but they made it there, right? People who've been to the Olympics, right? That were my students and who laughed at all my jokes, right? But nonetheless, so I just wanted to emphasize that. I didn't mean to take that aside, but people don't often, recognize, that reality, and it's a shame. And that's why I love the NCAA commercials and I love the Big Ten commercials. And now I'm down here, I see some ACC commercials where they highlight people that, as they say, go pro in other things, and I think that's so important for a space like Western Carolina, right? We just have a lower chance of our athletes going pro, but we have athletes that do go pro, but we just got a lower chance for a myriad of reasons with the power conferences and all. We know how the game goes, right? They produce, we mentioned politicians, right? But they produce business leaders, and using those notions from sporting philosophy, right? They become educators and coaches. I remember my eighth grade homeroom teacher, his name was Mr. Mason. He played quarterback for the Chicago Bears back when Paul Robeson was probably playing. But none of that. But I mean, the things that he learned, and he was such a great educator and mentor using those, those ideologies from sports philosophy and things of that nature. So now I'm going to throw a quick curveball to you, Alex, as a director of athletics, and be honest. How do you feel about Black student athletes joining MPHC organizations?
I feel great about it. We got a ton of them. But what's interesting, we got a lot of football players, basketball players, track athletes that are in those organizations. I feel great about it. It's part of the college experience that I would hate to take away from them. I do know for a fact that that there are some coaches, not here, not now, but when I was in school, that did not allow any student athletes to be in any fraternity because the team was a fraternity and they felt like there would create some division potentially with who you're spending your time with and so on and so forth. But no, I think it's fantastic. Absolutely. Absolutely. I don't, if that's something that someone wants to do, because here's the thing, my mother was a Delta and I grew up, she would, even from a little guy, they would be having meetings and I'd be out in the hallway waiting, reading a book or something like that. Or, we'd go to the, step shows on the campus of Knoxville College, back in the day when it was open. But, so I grew up seeing that, and I grew up and saw the family atmosphere, the brotherhood, the sisterhood, the camaraderie, and that meant something to me when I got to college. And so I am 100% supportive of our Black student athletes joining our Black fraternities and sororities. I think it's fantastic.
Indeed, indeed. And I'm pleased to hear that. And I'm pleased to keep discovering more and more how, they have been a positive partner with athletics and not a detriment. Because to speak honest, and I'm speaking now as someone who's been an advisor to several my fraternity chapters, a sorority chapter, and I'm currently an advisor to the Kappa chapter at Mars Hill, and the faculty advisor to our boys here at Western Carolina. We got some guys on the baseball team too, don't forget about them. But nonetheless, so I'm aware of the fear of physical harm to your student athlete in the intake process. When I was at Michigan State, Tom Izzo don't let his boys pledge. That's just, it's a no-no. D'Antonio, when he was there, was more amicable. And we had several brothers in our fraternity, several Omegas and Iotas and other fraternities on the football team when Coach D'Antonio was there. I know Nick Saban doesn't allow it as well. And that was something back at Michigan State. So that's why D'Antonio was unique. And then I've heard about at LSU and Alabama, he didn't allow it and doesn't allow it as well. So, you know, to be honest, you know, just because a coach might say, it isn't necessarily because they just hating on it. There might be some real concerns, and if there's a history of certain incidents happening on campus, regardless of the organization, you know, can definitely. But I know when I was an undergrad, I went to undergrad with several guys that played in the NBA and the NFL, and the guys in the NFL, now they're retired, you know, they pledged the Black fraternities and Sigmas. And speaking of mentorship and giving back, Charlie Batch is one of those guys. And what he's been doing in Pittsburgh that no one really knows about or pays attention to is beyond phenomenal. That mentorship that Kory spoke to, that presence, right? And then that giving advice and letting them know about perceptions and things that Alex mentioned, you know, he's actively on the ground doing that in Pittsburgh near where his sister got murdered. You know, it's just phenomenal work. All right, I'm going to kind of switch it up a little bit. Now, how important is it, and you've alluded a little bit to this, Alex, how important that we have Black collegiate coaches, particularly former student athletes and athletic administrators on college campuses? How important is that?
I think that it's important to have leadership representation that is indicative of the student athlete population. I truly, it's odd that there are, you know, so many Black football players in the Southern Conference. There's never been a Black head football coach in the Southern Conference. There have been very few Black basketball coaches, men's or women's. And so that's a little bit strange. I think it's extremely important in any career, especially as young Black athletes, to be able to see leaders on your campus that look like you. Because to be honest, it feels safe. It feels relatable many times. You know, that's you know, guys come in my office all the time and talk to me, sit down and chop it up, and they said, you know, Mr. Gary, I never visited with any of the administrators before, and I enjoyed that, and I think that that's important. I really do. And so, as I mentioned before, you know, there are more and more Black administrators creeping up in intercollegiate athletics that hopefully will lead to more and more diversity across intercollegiate athletics, and provide more and more mentors for our young Black students on our campuses.
Indeed. And now, as a journalist, Kory, do y'all talk about that amongst yourselves? Do y'all think about that? Do y'all notice increases in Black coaches or Black athletic administrators on the collegiate level? I know you've been covering Juwan Howard a lot recently, so I just want to get your thoughts on that.
It's increasing, but not for me, not by enough. Not nearly by enough. Let's say what, Division 1A, what, about over 120 schools, probably something like that. What 5 of the head coaches are Black. And as far as football goes, I think we talk about it. Like me, I've talked about it with Terry Foster. I've talked about it with Rob Parker before, two well-known black journalists. I've talked about the discrepancy of there's so many Black athletes at these colleges, but they don't have people that resemble them, that coach them, teach them, or speak up for them. And that is a problem because I believe if they have that familiarity, you will see them start to loosen up more, be more of themselves. You spoke about Michigan, right? So let's use the Michigan example. John Beilein, before he left, you know, Michigan was a great basketball program. It was good. It was on the up and coming. Won't say it was as attractive as some of the other schools, but they were doing a good job. Can't hate on it. But what you see these past 2 years, how Michigan's program, their image has changed under Juwan Howard because he's more relatable to those players. He's able to connect with them in a way that John Beilein couldn't connect with them. I think that is important for these athletes to have, people that they can connect with that look like them. I mean, why wouldn't it be important?
Indeed. And do you think it gives parents some type of comfort, assurance, or I can't find the right word, so we'll go with comfort, to see a Black athletic director or a Black coach actively courting their child to be a student athlete at their institution?
I think they're,
Yeah.
I think it means something to them. It's funny, we haven't. I'm looking. Matter of fact, our coach just left last week to go to another school, but we were talking about this a little bit, and I said to him, I said, you're out there, you're recruiting kids to come play basketball for us. Use me. I said, use me. And I know that sounds a little strange, but I said that because I feel like they do want to see that. You know what I'm saying? They like the fact that the leader of the department looks like their son or daughter. I mean, so I think it does mean something to them. I really do. We haven't had a chance to do a lot of it because of COVID. I came in May, as you mentioned before, and the recruiting has been shut down. We have not been able to recruit off campus or bring kids on campus since I've been here. But once that happens, I'll definitely play a huge part in the recruiting process. I'm looking forward to seeing how that helps our program.
Indeed. And I encourage you to do it. We need you to do it. Go ahead, Kory. I'm sorry.
I want to ask both of you a question because you're both in Carolina, and I actually, just before I hopped on the Zoom call, I spoke with somebody who's known in the state of Carolina who covers UNC athletics. Now, Alex, Mr. Gary, you spoke to the importance of having those coaches go out and resemble them to go talk to those players. But when you have somebody, I'm not asking you to. This is going to be a tough question. I don't want to put you on the spot, but when you have these coaches that look like us go out in these living rooms to recruit, but then you have a guy like the new UNC men's coach Hubert Davis come out and say that he's proud of his white wife and his biracial kids. Do you think that kind of sets anything back as far as the recruiting for the Black head coach? Do you think there's going to cause some kind of dissension or anything like that? Yeah. Because for her, the reporter I talked to wasn't too happy about the comments. Yeah. I don't want to put business out.
I don't know. I mean, maybe Hubert meant exactly what he said. Probably did, but it depends on who you're talking to, right? Yeah. It just depends. I think it can work both ways. I think that there's some families that would say, I can't believe, someone would say something like that. They would look at it as disrespectful. I think that there are others that it wouldn't matter too much. So I think it just kind of depends. But I will say this. It is so hard. I mean, you really have to be careful what you say, even when you don't mean. We all know this, right? When you don't mean it the way that it's interpreted, maybe you do, maybe you don't. You got to think about how it could be interpreted and what ripple effect that could have. And so I think it just depends on, who's involved.
Yeah,
their percent, because people look at things different ways.
Indeed. And I'm going to say first, as an individual, as a human being, what he said makes perfect sense. If he said, I'm not proud of my wife, I'd be like, what? I mean, it's his wife and his kid. He's supposed to be proud of them, right? I think just as Alex and Mr. Gary pointed out, he didn't articulate it. He didn't articulate what he was trying to say very well. He was trying to present it more so in in a anti-racist, post-racial type of context.
That's what I got. That's initially what I got from it. It's just that I'm just, hey, I got to put my journalist hat on and I'm observing the climate of what people are saying. And probably what he wants to say did not come off the way that it did. And he's catching all that flack. So I'm saying, like, from a recruiting standpoint, does something like that stick with a coach?
I think it would, particularly by, and then I'm sorry, Mr. Gary. I think it will, particularly because it goes back to perception. Some people are going to be put off by it and interpret it perhaps kind of like when they did LaDainian Tomlinson at his Hall of Fame speech. When he said he was proud of his last name, it was the people who owned his family's last name. But they missed the part when he said, and I took that name and made it good. You know, they missed that. They leave that part out. So they didn't get his whole message. So to throw people off, I think some parents, because I think it'd be more the parents than the student athlete themselves. They're just gonna be looking at UNC boy, basketball, UNC boy. But I think some of the parents may have pause on, is the values that would be reinforced, is it going to be a positive Black self-image or a negative Black self-image? So, I can see it's for some, just like Mr. Gary said, for some, in real life, and knowing some of the Black communities I've gotten to know down here, I say that from that perspective. There are some, because a lot of Black women was going crazy on my Twitter feed as a result of that statement. And some of them I know have children who are high school age, who are good athletes. Not saying they'll get recruited by Chapel Hill, but yeah. Indeed.
You got to be careful what you say.
Man.
That's the best way to put it. That's the best way to put it. I tell you, people will take what they want and make it into what they want. And you'll be like, that is not even what I said. It happens a lot. So then parlaying that moving forward, well, what about Black professional coaches, particularly former athletes, executives, and ownership? And I'm thinking of someone like Byron Leftwich, who I loved when he played at Marshall. And we would call him Leftwich because we was mispronouncing his name. I remember when he broke his leg in the MAC championship game, and they was carrying him up the field to the huddle because he had this cast on and couldn't bend his body. And he threw for like 400 yards. I love Byron Leftwich, but like the success he had with the Buccaneers as the quarterbacks coach, for example, and other people who have never played in the NFL, who were just quarterback coaches, white men, who get offered head coaching job at the head coaching job at the head coach.
We got to put some respect on Byron Leftwich. He wasn't just a quarterback coach; he was the OC.
Oh, the offensive coordinator. I'm sorry. To the great Byron Leftwich.
He didn't get all the credit, unfortunately.
Indeed.
Some people gave him credit, some people didn't.
Indeed. Number 12 is getting credit. For sure. So, I mean, what do you guys think about like the NFL? Like, I think of the NBA, and they're doing a better job, I feel. I could be wrong because y'all look more closely at the data than I do. I know it was a big stink regarding out there in Golden State, Steve Kerr and Mark. What was Mark's last name?
Jackson.
Yeah, Mark Jackson, one of the greatest point guards to play the game. But nonetheless, I know it was some stink about that. And it reminded me about the stink with Tony Dungy and Chucky, John Gruden. Right? It reminded me of that. Yeah. But NBA seems to be doing a little better. But in the NFL, man, like Bieniemy, and it's a whole bunch who aren't seeming to get a chance, and it's like the numbers are decreasing. Like, we don't want Herm Edwards not Herm Edwards, the guy in Cincinnati. We don't want him to retire because that'd be one less. And Marv Lewis has been there so long, right? We done lost Denny Green, and then he passed away. And we done lost the guy, the big. Anyway, I can go on and on. Let me stop.
Rochelle.
Yes, that's why I was. Yeah. Right, and and then with executiveships, we've seen some gains in the NFL. The Detroit Lions just you know, our new executives are top executive is African-American man, you know, and then what Ozzie Newsome has been doing for years and other people, right? But ownership has been extremely elusive in the NFL. It's not as elusive, but still a struggle in the NBA. You know, Magic Johnson broke grounds when they gave him part ownership and made him coach. And then he got some stake in the Dodgers. And then when Michael Jordan linked up with my frat brother and with the Charlotte Bobcats back in the day and all those things. But, you know, what are you guys' thoughts on professional coaches, Black professional coaches, particularly former athletes, executives, and ownership?
I think the what we're seeing is let's okay. I'm gonna go from the NBA and I'm gonna go to NBA real quick, then I'm gonna go to NFL.
Mm.
NBA, we're starting to see the numbers getting better because the NBA is a players' league for real. Like they really promote the players. In the NFL, they promote the shield and the helmet. NBA is really being a players' league, so that's why you're able to see more increases in some players getting opportunities to be part owners. Because right now, it's still a problem that the only majority Black owner in the NBA is Michael Jordan, right in your home state. That's the only Black majority owner. So, but at the same time, the minority ownership is increasing. You still have some hiccups along the way, like the Glenn Taylor and Kevin Garnett situation that was very ugly. I believe Aaron Aflalo, former NBA player and former Detroit Pistons, he was trying to get in on that buy-in group too. But I believe that over time, I'm not really worried about the NBA. I believe that there will come a time where we will see more owners coming to the table. I believe you can pretty much bet your bank on it. The guy we've said named multiple times, LeBron James, is definitely, I believe, going to become an owner of a team at some point. But the NFL, that's going to be a tricky one because they can't even get the NFL can't even get more than 5% of its coaches to be Black. So before let's for the NFL ownership, let's tackle this discrepancy with head coaches first, as opposed to even getting to ownership. Because think about this, they literally just had to change the rules again for the draft to get Black coaches and Black GMs hired. You're now getting compensated with compensatory draft picks just for hiring a Black GM or one of your one of your Black coordinators gets promoted from another team, then you get draft picks. They have to create incentives to hire Black men as coaches, and the NFL is over 75% Black. We got to start. The NFL has to start on a lower level before they even get to ownership. Would I love to see a Black owner in my lifetime in the NFL? Of course. Why wouldn't we? But we got to start. We as a community, we got to demand more from the NFL on the lower on a I don't even want to say a lower scale, but on this scale before we even get to the ownership.
Indeed. Yeah.
I think that it's a problem, and I will say this, even for me being in my position as an athletic director, thinking about being an NFL head coach or an NFL GM or something, there's so much pressure to be successful because you represent so much to people. You know what I'm saying? Not at this level necessarily, but as an NFL GM or an NFL head coach. And someone told me the other day, I was talking to somebody about some different things, and they said that we don't get a second chance. That's what they said too. So you don't have success one time. I mean, Todd Bowles, right? Todd Bowles actually wasn't that bad of a coach, I don't believe, in New York. It was a great defensive coordinator for the Super Bowl winning Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and he didn't get another chance, did he? Is he a head coach right now?
Todd Bowles?
Yeah, did he get a job?
No, Todd Bowles is still with
Tampa Bay, right?
Buccaneers. As a matter of fact, Dave, I don't know if you remember this. It was just recently. Todd Bowles was supposed to interview for the Detroit Lions job. He canceled it because he said, I already know who you guys are giving the job to. I'm not about to waste my time and fly out an interview.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a lot of pressure to succeed, right? Because, well, for one, you might not get another chance. For two, so many people are looking at you. And, I don't know what the secret sauce is. I mean, to provide draft picks to a team is, I'd never thought anybody would do something like that, right? And if that's where we're going in order to try to make this work, I don't know that that's not the answer, in my opinion. I think that people have to understand what's going on in the world, have to see other people that don't look like them for what they're saying, for what's in between their ears, and take a chance and provide an opportunity. And it's worked out many times. It hasn't worked out some other times, but you can say that about any group. Mm-hmm. And so I don't know what it's going to take to get us there in the NFL. I feel like they've been trying to do this for so long, and it just hasn't gotten there. And so, I think that as these movements continue, the dialogue picks up, and there is more pressure on owners, I believe, to do this, which I think is a very good thing. Hopefully that it changes. Hopefully at some point it just changes. We want it to happen yesterday, and who knows when it'll actually happen. But hopefully, it's just so many things going on in the world today, social justice and the everything going on. Somebody says, you know what, I'm going to do my part, and I'm going to step up, and I'm going to do the right thing, and give somebody that deserves a chance, that has the resume, give them a chance.
Mm-hmm. One thing I do want to add on is I appreciate what the new principal owner for the Detroit Lions, Sheila Ford Hamp, has done. Is when asked this question, I was in her Zoom press conference, and she addressed this. She said, she's basically said, look, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is a problem in the NFL, and we need to handle it. Right now, it is what it is, but it needs to get done. But she did put her money where her mouth is. She hired a black GM, who then turned around and hired a black assistant GM. Granted, they did not hire Eric Bieniemy as coach, but they have a Dan Campbell, whose team is full of black assistants. Outside of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the Detroit Lions have the blackest coaching staff in the NFL right now. So it's going to take owners like a Sheila Ford Hamp who are just going to say, look, we know it's a problem. I'm going to do my part. Now I'm going to urge the others to do their part. So I would say that from a Detroiter standpoint, it just feels good that our professional football team solved the issue. And granted, while they did not hire a black man as a head coach, they hired them everywhere else.
Indeed. And just on that, if we're being honest, me as a Detroit Lions fan, I mean, I feel like we hired the right guy as head coach. So, I don't think it's a lot of anger or backlash with that. Now, this makes me, and Major League Baseball is different because the majority demographic of the MLB is mostly Latinx folk, right? Now, I say that to say, what happened to baseball in the black community? When I was a little kid, we was playing baseball. My uncle coached several teams in the Detroit PAL League on the east side. My cousins played baseball. I wanted to play baseball, but I eventually didn't because I'm slow and other obstacles that I have. But nonetheless, I feel like maybe my generation is the last generation where baseball was still very popular in the black community. What's going on with baseball in the black community, fellas?
Baseball needs to do a better job of hitting the community. Simple as that. Basketball, always in the community. They're always, doing community, the professional teams in the colleges always doing community service. NFL, whether you like them or not, always doing something. MLB has not really been that inviting as over the past decades or so, pretty much just generally to African American players. And it's something that the Players Alliance, which is the group of the former and current black professional baseball players, they've been going out and trying their hardest to increase the awareness and bring them back to the game. They just, matter of fact, a couple of months ago, they had an event in at the former PAL at the corner ballpark. They had an event there where former Tigers Cameron Maben, he was out there giving brand spanking new baseball equipment to inner city baseball players who needed equipment, and they're trying to increase the awareness. Detroit Tigers general manager Al Avila spoke to it as well. The MLB, we have to do a better job of increasing our awareness in the communities and making the game of baseball more inviting to everybody. Because right now it's not appealing to everybody.
Mm-hmm. And on the collegiate level, because I'm gonna be honest, Alex, of all the colleges and universities I taught at, this is the blackest baseball team I've seen.
When I was in school here, we had 3 black players on the team. When I transferred to VCU for my senior year, we had 5 in Richmond there, and which felt like amazing. Growing up, I played baseball my life, and in high school, one summer league, I had another black player on the team. But and maybe when I was 12, I had 1 black player on the team. But to come to college and have 3 and then go to 5, it was fantastic. Just because there's a special bond between African American baseball players, right? Because there's just not many of them. I think that many people get confused when they watch Major League Baseball and they think it's a bunch of African American guys running out there, and it's like there may not be any of them.
Exactly.
So, I don't know. I think that baseball's becoming. I do think it's becoming more. I think it's becoming more diverse. I feel like in college baseball, you're seeing more black players than you used to, and I really like it at schools like, I don't know, Power 5 schools. You see it quite a bit at Power 5 schools, not quite a bit, but when you see it, it's like I still today, if I'm watching University of Washington play a baseball game and I see they got a leadoff guy that's African American and a third baseman or something like that, I'm excited. I want to watch those guys play because I know how rare it is. But I think it's getting a little better. And on the softball side too.
Indeed,
many women that are they're so fun to watch. So it's starting to get a little bit better. There's a team when I was at the University of Michigan working there in the athletic department. They played a super regional against Louisiana Lafayette, the Raging Cajuns, and the Raging Cajuns came up there and they had about 3 or 4 African-American young women, and they all played, and they were all getting time. They were all out there, and they were so fun to watch because you don't see that a lot in softball, but you are starting to see more of it. And so, at the youth level, I honestly don't know. I don't know what the issues are and what's really going on at that level. I do know, as Kory mentioned, there are some different programs they're trying. They've tried for a while, and RBI baseball and things like that. Is that the one you mentioned? Did you mention that one, Kory?
No, I didn't know.
Yeah, RBI is a big organization, so I'd love to see more of it. But as a black baseball player, we definitely notice each other, and there's kind of a special bond there.
Indeed. And what about other sports that historically hadn't attracted a lot of African Americans? Although growing up where Kory and I grew up, there are more black hockey players on the youth level than what people realize, right? And African American and African Canadian culture has a strong contribution to the development of hockey as an organized sport. But for whatever reason, black people have been kind of estranged from hockey. And I remember when a couple African American gentlemen or African Canadian gentlemen were in the NHL, and one of them was a goalie, and he was like super popular. And, you know, people like me who don't even follow NHL, although I'm from Hockey Town, USA, I only pay attention if the Red Wings are about to win. So I can go downtown and turn up, to be honest with you. However, even I would look for highlights of this guy on ESPN. And being from Michigan, you know, most people may not realize it, but Kory can speak to it. Like, it's far more Black people that like NASCAR and drags and Formula One racing and motocrossing than what might be assumed, right? And I'm one of those guys, right? So I remember like Bubba, the two Bubbas. One was a dark-skinned African-American kid on motocross, and now we got the Bubba, the light-skinned guy from Florida and South Carolina doing NASCAR. You know, and obviously Tiger Woods helped bust, you know, golf back wide open, because if we study the history of golf, Black people have always been involved and been there. If we study, and some of these PGA courses owe their life to Black people, to be quite honest, like the one down in northern North Carolina, South Pines, for example. And, you know, but how do y'all feel? Are we seeing an increase, or is just an illusion of Black athletes engaging in what may be perceived as non-traditional sports for Black people?
I definitely think it's an increase coming. It's a slow increase, but I believe that, you know, as things evolve, as athletes evolve in all sports, so is the Black athlete, you know, finding out different sports to be in. I mean, we've always been in every sport. I mean, heck, you talked about fraternity brothers. One of our fraternity brothers is one of the greatest center players of all time, Arthur Ashe. He's one of them. So I believe that there is a change on the horizon, but I believe some of these sports, again, it's kind of like back to the baseball thing. It needs to be more of a push towards the inclusion and inviting to learn more about the sport, and show that there are other options besides basketball and football to not only play sports, but to make a living in sports as well.
One of the things that really, I don't watch this sport. I think it's very boring. No offense to anybody that watches soccer, but I shouldn't say that. Men's soccer is boring. Women's soccer I love.
Women's soccer is awesome.
Okay, there you go. Yeah.
Women's soccer is actually a lot of fun to watch. But you know, the soccer's the biggest sport in the world, right? And you know, there's been a strong history of racism around soccer, and I mean, it's still there, and it's so sad because it's so direct and accepted in many of these places around the world. But I tell you what, you know, I was at Oregon State before here, and we had a ton of Black players, many of them international, coming in from different places and whatnot. One of the sports that I play that I think we are a long way away from, there's a lot of Black people that play golf, but I tell you what, you go out to a course, I rarely see any other Black people on golf courses that I go to. And you really don't see many Black professional golfers on the PGA Tour. And I'd love to see more of that. I would love to see more of that. One of our alums here used to play basketball here at Western. I follow him on Facebook, and his son is, I don't know, maybe 13 or 14. And he's always posting these things of his son playing golf and having a lot of success. And I love seeing that, you know. But I would say this, he's always the only young Black man at his tournaments when they're taking pictures with their trophies and stuff.
Yeah.
And I wonder what that's like for him. You know, I really wonder what that experience is like for him. And he probably is fine. He probably is used to being in that atmosphere. But I would love to see more African-American individuals playing the game of golf, both men and women.
And I think what you said is important. My son, and it kind of broke my heart, but it isn't my life. My son is a soccer phenom for Belleville High School in Belleville, Michigan. I would take him to the Michigan State camps, and because I was working there and was a grad student there, I was able to talk them into letting him, although he was underage, go to camps with the older kids. And he would win all the awards, right? But he was always the only black kid on his team, the only black kid. And he told me a couple months ago that he wants to go out for the basketball team now. And I know because being the only black kid won, to be quite honest with you, you know. And he told me he didn't want to be a college athlete, so we're not losing scholarship opportunity because he wasn't going to accept one to be a college athlete. But it just, you know, so I know that it's a real issue for some kids, right?
Yep. Absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I would like to see more, but I know there's socioeconomic reasons as part of this as well, but more black youth athletes get back into swimming. You know, Detroit used to produce, Detroit public schools, particularly what they call the magnet schools. That's MLK, Renaissance, and what's that other school I don't like? Cass Tech. My daddy worked at Cass Tech, DPS, for over 40 years. So I know the basements and the boiler rooms of those schools intimately, even the old factory, the original Cass Tech. But those schools, as well as DePauw's that might not be open still, and U of D, they used to produce outstanding swimmers and tennis players, you know. And I know a lot of pools are closed in urban public schools, and et cetera, unrelated to the COVID, just closed. But I would really, really like to see, you know, that again, you know. You know, it's just so many various opportunities, like you all mentioned, besides football and basketball, and for the ladies, we will have to add softball. Now, the sisters always seem to have a strong contingent on the volleyball teams. You know, and do y'all perceive it as the case? And unfortunately, Kory, as a sports journalist, you might be one of those guys who ignore ladies volleyball.
You know what? It's kind of funny you mentioned ignoring ladies volleyball. The first ever sport I covered was ladies volleyball at Eastern Michigan. That was the first sport I covered. So I mean, when you talking about not knowing nothing about the game, I knew not a lick, and I can't remember her name at that time. I would have to go back and look it up. But to her credit, I told the EMU women's volleyball coach, I'm like, look, I'm gonna be honest. This is the assignment they gave me. I know nothing about this game. And she worked, she was so gracious and worked with me and schooled me and like, hey, fix this, do this. So I am.
We have several African American young women on our volleyball team here at Western, and I don't, you know, it's an interesting sport, right? I mean, you got to be athletic. Many times, you know, tall young women, and I don't think we have any women on our team from the state of North Carolina. Oddly enough, maybe they don't play as good of volleyball in North Carolina as they do in other areas. But you see that more and more, which is great to see, even across the conference, whether it's Sanford or Mercer or whatever the case may be. I go to all the games that are here, and there's a pretty good diverse set of student athletes when it comes to volleyball. So, but you know, maybe that's just part of the sport too. You talk about the height and the athleticism. You know, it's also one of those sports where, you know, it's easy to play and it's fun to play. It's active. It's not boring. So I think that lends itself to a number of different young people that want to play it.
Indeed. And it's exciting too, man. Volleyball, I like watching particular collegiate volleyball and on the court, Olympic volleyball. I don't like the sand, the beach volleyball. It's too much. It's too other. It's something else. To be quite honest with you, but I do, and those women are very athletic, and a lot of them, if they had you know, wanted to, they could probably be a two-sport athlete. It's just unfortunate that the majority of the predominant of the two sports are the same season. Like they could probably be a basketball player and a volleyball player. It's a lot of similarities in skill sets outside of actually shooting, you know, in that regard. Yeah, and growing up, you know, when we would go to the volleyball games for my middle school and high school, you know, if they had Black students at the school, no matter how many of them they had a couple sisters on the volleyball. Even if it was only 5 sisters in the whole school, 2 of them was on the volleyball team, no matter what school. And I always thought that was very interesting and, you know, in many ways, kind of like baseball was for us in my era, because we had a lot of Black guys on my high school baseball team. And if they had some Black kids at their school, whatever schools we played, and since you're familiar with the area, so we're talking back when the conference was Romulus, Belleville, Tempest, Bedford, both Ann Arbor, Pioneer, Huron, Ypsi Lincoln, Ypsi High, Wayne Memorial, John Glenn, and Adrian and Saline. You know, that was in Belleville, if I didn't mention, like that was the conference then. And, you know, obviously back then, places like Saline didn't have a strong Black population. But even, you know, Ann Arbor, Huron, Pioneer, you know, you would see and, you know, and be like, wow, you know, they doing it. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Indeed.
Absolutely.
So when I'm gathering as we wrap this up, that we have a lot of high optimism, a lot of high hopes, and we're very happy and proud of the progress that the Black athlete has made in the 21st century. But we've acknowledged there's still some struggles and some gains that need to be made, right? And then we agree that it's more things that we as a society has to hash out about the status of certain athletes based upon their intersectionality. But just last thoughts. If you all had a son, would you want your son to be a college athlete? Or a daughter, I should say. I was just being so biased and sexist. I got a daughter, and she may end up being a better athlete than my son because her mom is like 4-time, 5-time high school All-American in track and field nationals. Her daddy, a big-time AAU coach. He coached Robert Griffith III in AAU track. 2 of her brothers, like 3-time. If she got 5, they both got 3 because she's the best athlete in their family. All-time All-American in track. Her daddy was on the swim team at Morehouse with Samuel L. Jackson, on the track team with Edwin Moses. Edwin Moses was his roommate. So my daughter may end up being a better athlete. So, but would y'all, if y'all have or had children, would you want them to be college athletes?
Don't say had yet for me because I don't want to be making sure I don't have no secret kids out here. Something like that. But no, I'll most definitely. Why not? Yes, there are a ton of challenges that we still have to overcome. But I believe that is also the great thing about the professional athlete and the Black professional athlete right now. They're in a space where they can create their own platform and be a real role model and inspire a generation coming up under them. And also, I just believe it's just a really great thing to do just for your personal life. If that's the route that you want to go, you want to be an athlete, by all means, I'm for it. And I'm going to support you through the challenges that you will face because all athletes face some type of challenge. So yeah, I'm for it.
Well, I 100% would want my children to be college athletes. I think that there's so much about the experience that I learned. It does help you develop. It helps you develop in all the ways that they say it does, from time management, conflict resolution, teamwork, all that kind of stuff. I think it's like a learning laboratory is what I like to say in terms of being an intercollegiate athletic athlete. But just, maybe to say one more thing as we wrap up here, college athletes, the Black college athlete in the 21st century today has a lot of pressure on them, a lot of pressure and a lot of questions about what to do and how to do it. And that's not easy to deal with. There's so many mental health issues going on right now already because of the pandemic and everything else. But tackle on top of that, people have an expectation for you to do a certain thing and say a certain thing and be a certain way. And, you know, why didn't you guys do this? Or why didn't you say that? And there's a lot of pressure on our athletes. There's a lot of pressure on our administrators, right, to do the right thing. But, you know, I think that, like I mentioned this before, we just have to be there to support our student athletes, to make sure we're listening to them, to be there, you know, and all that kind of stuff is cliche, but it's actually true. To take the time to actually sit down in your office and talk to one of the student athletes about what's going on, how they're feeling, and just be an ear. I think that there is so much pressure, more pressure than people know, with all of the stuff going on right now. And so, you know, all that said, with all those potential issues and all the struggles and everything else, I would 100% want my son or daughter to participate in intercollegiate athletics. I think that there are way more benefits than drawbacks.
Indeed. I agree. But when my son said he didn't want to do it, I wasn't going to try to pressure. Indeed. Awesome. Well, thank you, gentlemen, so much. It was a lot of great insights. This was a wonderful dialogue. For those watching now and those who will watch later on YouTube, I hope you all have gotten great information, different perspectives to consider different things. And I just hope all around that people have a greater appreciation for the Black athlete, a better and deeper understanding in some of the changes that they may see in the Black athlete in the 21st century. And just recognize that they have to understand the Black athlete within the broader context of the Black community, of the American community, and of the globe as a global citizen, right? You know, these are human beings, and they don't live and operate in a bubble, pun intended, or a vacuum. You know, all the things that affect us affect them, and in some cases, it affects them even greater. Right.
And you know, just real quick, I wanted to say thank you for inviting me on, and Mr. Gary, just to be able to sit and hear your perspective, and just an honor to be asked to be on here and just be able to learn to have such an intellectual conversation. I can now take some mental notes myself when you post this, Dave, and be like, all right, write that down. Okay, yeah, thank you.
I appreciate that.
No, appreciate you guys. This has been a lot of fun. Wish you the best, Kory. Maybe I'll see you at Sidetrack sometime in Michigan in the future.
Oh,
Ypsilanti.
And maybe you might see me down in North Carolina, because that's where I've been trying to migrate to for the longest. Dave knows that.
Let us know when you come. Absolutely.
All right.
We'll host you well.
All right.
Well, thank you, guys.
Thanks, Dr. Walton.
My pleasure. And y'all have a wonderful evening.
Okay, you too.